The church bells rang through the warm September air as Maria stepped out of the vintage Rolls-Royce. Her white dress sparkled in the afternoon sun, and her smile was brighter than the diamonds around her neck. She had waited 28 years for this moment, and everything seemed perfect. The small Italian church in Brooklyn was decorated with white roses and baby's breath, just like she had always dreamed. Antonio waited at the altar, his hands slightly shaking as he adjusted his black bow tie for the 10th time. His best friend Marco stood beside him, whispering jokes to calm his nerves. Antonio had known Maria for 3 years, meeting her at a coffee shop where she worked as a barista. He fell in love with her laugh first, then her kindness, and finally her strength. She didn't know everything about his past, and he planned to keep it that way. The guests filled the wooden pews, a mix of Maria's large Puerto Rican family and Antonio's smaller, quieter Italian relatives. Maria's mother dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief while her father stood tall and proud, ready to walk his only daughter down the aisle. On Antonio's side, his uncle Salvatore sat in the front row, his dark eyes scanning the room with the habit of a man who had spent his life watching his back. As the wedding march began, all eyes turned to Maria. She floated down the aisle, her veil trailing behind her like a cloud. Antonio's breath caught in his throat. In that moment, nothing else existed but her. The dangerous world he had tried to leave behind felt like a distant nightmare, and this beautiful woman walking toward him was his salvation. The ceremony was traditional and touching. Maria's cousins sang Ave Maria, her voice filling the church with an almost heavenly sound. When the priest asked if anyone objected to the union, there was a moment of silence so complete that you could hear the rustling of programs and the distant sound of traffic outside. No one spoke, and the ceremony continued. They exchanged vows they had written themselves. Maria promised to love Antonio through whatever storms life might bring, having no idea how prophetic her words would prove to be. Antonio vowed to protect her and cherish her, his voice breaking slightly when he promised to always be honest with her. Marco shifted uncomfortably beside him, knowing the weight of the secrets Antonio carried. The rings were exchanged. Simple gold bands that Maria had picked out because she said their love didn't need fancy decorations. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, Antonio lifted Maria's veil with trembling hands. Their kiss was gentle and full of promise, and the church erupted in applause and cheers. The reception was held at Rosario's, an elegant Italian restaurant that Salvatore had recommended. What Maria didn't know was that Salvatore owned the place, along with several other businesses that served as fronts for less legitimate operations. The ballroom was transformed into a fairy tale setting with twinkling lights, white tablecloths, and centerpieces of red roses. The newlyweds entered to thunderous applause, Maria having changed into a second dress that allowed her to dance more freely. The band played a mix of Italian classics and modern hits, keeping the dance floor packed. Antonio's grandmother, a tiny woman in her 80s, danced with surprising energy, making everyone laugh with her spirited moves. During dinner, the speeches began. Maria's father spoke about watching his little girl grow up, his voice thick with emotion. He welcomed Antonio to the family, saying he had never seen his daughter happier. Marco's speech was lighter, filled with funny stories about Antonio's attempts to impress Maria in the early days, including the time he tried to cook her dinner and nearly burned down his apartment. Salvatore stood to speak, and a subtle change came over the room. Those who knew who he really was sat a little straighter, paid a little more attention. He spoke about family, about loyalty, about the bonds that tie people together. His words seemed innocent enough to most, but Antonio heard the underlying message. Family was everything, and you never truly left the family. As the evening progressed, Maria noticed a woman she didn't recognize standing near the back of the room. She was stunning, with long black hair and a red dress that seemed almost too glamorous for a wedding guest. The woman's eyes never left Antonio, watching him with an intensity that made Maria uncomfortable. When she pointed her out to Antonio, asking who she was, he glanced over and his face went pale. "Just someone from the old neighborhood," he said quickly, taking Maria's hand and leading her back to the dance floor. But Maria saw the way his jaw tightened, the way his eyes kept drifting back to where the woman stood. The woman in red was Isabella Torino, and she was much more than someone from the old neighborhood. She was the daughter of Vincent Torino, one of the most powerful crime bosses in New York. She was also Antonio's former fiancée, the woman he was supposed to marry before he tried to leave the life behind. Her presence at the wedding was no coincidence. As the night wore on, the celebration continued in full swing. Maria's aunts pulled Antonio onto the dance floor for the traditional money dance, pinning bills to his suit as they took turns spinning around with him. The cake cutting was met with cheers and camera flashes, and Maria laughed as she carefully fed Antonio a small piece, despite her cousins chanting for her to smash it in his face. But through it all, Antonio couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in his stomach since he saw Isabella. He knew her well enough to know she didn't make social calls. Her being here meant something, and none of the possibilities were good. He tried to keep his worry from Maria, forcing smiles and laughing at the right moments, but Marco noticed his distraction. Near midnight, as the party began to wind down, Antonio excused himself to use the restroom. He wasn't surprised when he found Salvatore waiting for him in the hallway, looking serious. "You see who's here?" Salvatore said. It wasn't a question. "What does she want?" Antonio asked, though he suspected he already knew. "You know what she wants? What she's always wanted? You." Antonio's hands clenched into fists. "I'm married now. That life is behind me." Salvatore laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think a ring on your finger changes who you are? Who your family is? Vincent Torino doesn't forget, Antonio, and neither does his daughter." Before Antonio could respond, the door opened and Marco appeared. "Maria's looking for you," he said, his eyes flicking between Antonio and Salvatore. "Everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Antonio said, straightening his tie. "Just family catching up." He walked back to the reception, his mind racing. He found Maria saying goodbye to some of her relatives, her face glowing with happiness. When she saw him, she smiled and reached for his hand. "There you are. I thought you'd abandoned me already," she teased. He pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her perfume. "Never," he whispered. "I'll never leave you." As they prepared to leave for their honeymoon suite at the Plaza Hotel, Antonio noticed Isabella was gone. The relief he felt was short-lived when Marco pressed a piece of paper into his hand during their goodbye hug. "She left this for you," Marco whispered. Antonio pocketed the note without looking at it, not wanting to ruin Maria's perfect day. They left the reception in a shower of rice and rose petals, Maria laughing as they ran to the waiting limo. As they drove away, she rested her head on his shoulder, completely unaware that their fairy tale wedding had just become the beginning of a nightmare. The honeymoon suite at the Plaza Hotel was everything Maria had imagined and more. Rose petals covered the king-size bed, champagne chilled in a silver bucket, and the lights of Manhattan twinkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She spun around in delight, still wearing her wedding dress, feeling like a princess in a fairy tale. Antonio watched her with a mixture of love and dread. The note in his pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. While Maria was in the bathroom changing, he finally pulled it out and read Isabella's elegant handwriting. "You can't run from destiny, my love. We need to talk. Tomorrow, noon, Central Park Boathouse. Come alone, or I come to her." His hands shook as he burned the note in the sink, washing the ashes down the drain. When Maria emerged in a silk nightgown, her eyes sparkling with happiness, he pushed his fears aside. This was their wedding night, and he wouldn't let Isabella ruin it. The next morning, Maria woke to find Antonio already dressed, staring out the window at Central Park below. She stretched lazily, admiring her new husband's broad shoulders and the way the morning light played across his face. "Good morning, husband," she said playfully. He turned and smiled, but she noticed it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Morning, beautiful. How about breakfast in bed?" "That sounds perfect, but first come back to bed for a few minutes," she said, patting the space beside her. Antonio hesitated. It was already 11 o'clock. "Actually, I just remembered I need to pick up something. A surprise for you. Give me an hour?" Maria's face fell slightly, but she nodded. "Okay, but hurry back. We're supposed to leave for Italy tonight, remember?" "Of course," he said, kissing her forehead. "Order whatever you want from room service. I'll be back before you know it." He left before he could change his mind, before the hurt in her eyes could make him tell her everything. The walk to Central Park was short, but each step felt like a mile. He found Isabella exactly where she said she'd be, sitting at a table overlooking the lake, wearing oversized sunglasses and a white dress that made her look deceptively innocent. "You came?" she said, not looking up from her coffee. "You didn't give me much choice." Antonio sat down across from her, his body tense. Isabella finally looked at him, removing her sunglasses to reveal eyes that were red from crying. 3 years, Antonio. You disappeared for 3 years. No call, no letter, nothing. Do you know what that did to me? We were never really together, Isabella. Our fathers arranged everything. I never promised you anything." "Liar!" Her voice was sharp enough to make nearby diners look over. She lowered it, but the intensity remained. "You loved me. I know you did. Before you met her." Antonio sighed. This was harder than he'd expected. "What do you want, Isabella?" "I want what was stolen from me. You." She leaned forward, her perfume bringing back memories he'd tried to forget. "My father is dying, Antonio. Pancreatic cancer. He has maybe 6 months. He wants to see me married before he goes. Married to the man who was promised to me. I'm already married. Marriages can be annulled. Accidents happen." The casual way she said it made Antonio's blood run cold. "If you touch Maria—" "I would never hurt an innocent woman," Isabella interrupted. "But my father's men might not be so discriminating. You know how these things go. Sometimes people get caught in the crossfire." Antonio's fists clenched under the table. "What happened to you, Isabella? You weren't like this before." "You happened to me." Her composure cracked, revealing raw pain underneath. "You left me to face my father's rage alone. Do you know what it's like to be the daughter who couldn't keep her man? The embarrassment you caused our family?" "I'm sorry," Antonio said, meaning it. "I never wanted to hurt you, but I couldn't live that life anymore. The violence, the fear, always looking over my shoulder. I wanted something normal." "Normal?" Isabella spat the word like it tasted bitter. "You think you can just decide to be normal? You were born into this life, Antonio. It's in your blood. Your Uncle Salvatore knows it. My father knows it. Deep down, you know it too. You're wrong. I'm done with all of that." Isabella smiled sadly. "No one's ever really done. Not while they're still breathing." She stood, putting her sunglasses back on. "You have 1 week. Come back to the family, to me, or I can't guarantee your pretty little wife's safety. My father still has men everywhere, Antonio, even in Italy." She walked away, leaving Antonio sitting alone, his coffee growing cold. He knew she wasn't bluffing. Vincent Torino's reach was long, and his reputation for brutality was well earned. Antonio had seen firsthand what happened to people who crossed the Torino family. When he returned to the hotel, Maria was dressed and packed, excitement radiating from her. "There you are. I was starting to worry." Did you get my surprise? Antonio forced a smile and pulled out a jewelry box he'd bought from the hotel gift shop. Inside was a simple gold bracelet, overpriced but pretty. For my beautiful wife. Maria's face lit up as he clasped it around her wrist. It's perfect. Now come on. We need to leave for the airport in an hour. The flight to Rome was torture for Antonio. Maria slept against his shoulder while he stared out the window, trying to figure a way out of this mess. He couldn't tell her the truth. Not yet. She'd insist on going to the police, not understanding that the police couldn't protect them from the Torinos. Some of them were on Vincent's payroll. Their hotel in Rome was a small boutique property near the Spanish Steps, charming and romantic. Maria fell in love with it immediately, delighting in the ancient architecture and the view from their balcony. For a few hours, Antonio almost forgot about the threat hanging over them as they walked hand in hand through the cobblestone streets, stopping for gelato and throwing coins in the Trevi fountain. That night, as they dined at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the city, Antonio's phone rang. It was Marco. "Sorry to interrupt the honeymoon," Marco said, his voice tense. "But we have a problem. Salvatore's been asking questions about when you're coming back, and there's something else. Some of Torino's men were spotted at your apartment building." Antonio stepped away from the table, whispering urgently. "What do they want with my apartment?" "Information, probably. Looking for anything they can use. Tony, you need to tell Maria what's going on. She deserves to know." "I can't. Not yet. It'll destroy her." "It'll destroy her more if something happens and she never saw it coming." After he hung up, Antonio returned to find Maria watching him with concern. "Is everything okay? You look upset." "Just work stuff. Nothing important." She reached across the table and took his hand. "Antonio, we're married now. You can tell me anything. Whatever it is, we'll face it together." The irony of her words wasn't lost on him. He squeezed her hand, wishing he could tell her everything. But looking at her trusting face, he couldn't bring himself to shatter her happiness. Not yet. Over the next few days, they explored Rome like typical tourists. They visited the Colosseum, the Vatican, and dozens of small churches and museums. Maria took hundreds of photos, insisting on selfies at every location. Antonio tried to stay present, to enjoy their time together, but he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. His instincts were right. On their fourth day in Rome, as they sat at a cafe near the Pantheon, Antonio spotted a familiar face. Dominic Torino, Isabella's cousin, was sitting 3 tables away reading a newspaper. When their eyes met, Dominic raised his espresso cup in a mock toast. "I need to use the restroom," Antonio told Maria, his voice carefully neutral. He walked inside the cafe, not surprised when Dominic followed. They faced each other in the narrow hallway, 2 men who had once been like brothers. "Dom," Antonio said quietly, "how long have you been following us?" "Since you landed. Isabella wanted to make sure you were enjoying your honeymoon." Dominic's smile was cold. "Your wife is beautiful, by the way. It would be a shame if something happened to her." "Is that a threat?" "Just an observation. You know how dangerous Rome can be for tourists. People get robbed, kidnapped, sometimes they just disappear." Antonio grabbed Dominic's collar, slamming him against the wall. "You stay away from her!" Dominic didn't resist, just smiled. "There's the Antonio I remember, the fighter. Isabella misses that man." "That man is gone." "Is he? Because from where I'm standing, he looks pretty alive." Dominic straightened his collar as Antonio released him. "You have 3 days left. Isabella's being generous, considering how you humiliated our family. Don't waste her kindness." After Dominic left, Antonio splashed cold water on his face, trying to calm down. When he returned to the table, Maria was paying the bill. "I'm getting tired," she said. Can we go back to the hotel? He agreed, grateful for the excuse to get her somewhere safe. But as they walked through the winding streets, Antonio noticed more familiar faces. Torino soldiers strategically placed, watching their every move. The message was clear. They could get to Maria whenever they wanted. That night, as Maria slept peacefully beside him, Antonio made a decision. He couldn't put her in danger. He had to find a way to protect her, even if it meant doing the unthinkable. He quietly got out of bed and went to the balcony, dialing a number he knew by heart but hadn't called in years. Antonio? His mother's voice was surprised but warm. Is that really you? Mom, I need help. I'm in trouble. There was a pause. What kind of trouble? The Torino kind. His mother sighed heavily. I told you this day would come. You can't run from who you are, son. I'm not calling to hear I told you so. I need to protect my wife. Wife? You got married? Yes, and now Isabella Torino wants me back. She's threatening Maria. Another long pause. Come home, Antonio. We'll figure this out as a family. Your uncle has been waiting for you to return. I can't come back to that life, Mom. Then your wife will pay the price for your stubbornness. Is she worth it? Antonio looked back through the window at Maria sleeping peacefully, her face serene in the moonlight. She's worth everything. Then you know what you have to do. After hanging up, Antonio stood on the balcony for a long time, watching the eternal city sleep. Somewhere out there, Dominic and others were watching, waiting. He had 3 days to make an impossible choice: return to a life of violence and crime, betraying everything he'd promised Maria, or refuse and watch the woman he loved become a casualty in a war she didn't even know existed. The next morning, Maria woke to find Antonio sitting in a chair, fully dressed, watching her. You're up early, she said sleepily. What's wrong? We need to talk, he said, his voice heavy. Maria sat up, suddenly alert. What is it? You're scaring me. Antonio moved to sit on the bed, taking her hands in his. There are things about my past I haven't told you, things I was hoping would stay buried. Whatever it is, we can handle it together, Maria said, though her voice wavered. My family, they're not just in the restaurant business. They're involved in other things, illegal things. Maria's eyes widened, but she didn't pull her hands away. Are you saying your family is in the Mafia? Antonio nodded, unable to meet her eyes. I tried to leave that life behind. That's why I moved to Brooklyn, changed my name slightly, tried to start fresh. But they found me. Who found you? A woman I was supposed to marry. Isabella Torino. Her father is one of the most powerful crime bosses in New York. When I left, I dishonored their family. Now she wants me back and she's threatening you if I don't comply. Maria was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Then, to Antonio's surprise, her face hardened with determination. So what do we do? She asked. We? Maria, you don't understand how dangerous these people are. I understand that my husband is in trouble. I understand that we made vows 3 days ago to stand by each other through everything. So I'm asking again, what do we do? Antonio felt a surge of love for this brave woman he'd married, but he also felt the weight of responsibility for putting her in danger. I don't know, he admitted, but we need to be very careful. They're watching us. The revelation changed everything about their honeymoon. Where Maria had once seen romantic Roman streets, she now noticed the men who lingered too long at corners, the cars that seemed to follow them. Antonio watched her transformation with a mixture of pride and regret. His brave wife was learning to live with fear, and it broke his heart. On their last day in Rome, they stayed in their hotel room, ordering room service and making plans. Maria had surprised him with her practical approach to their crisis. She made lists, asked questions about the Torino family structure, and tried to understand the world her husband had come from. We could go to the FBI, she suggested, pacing the small room. They have witness protection programs. The Torinos have connections everywhere, Antonio explained. Some FBI agents, local police, judges. They're all on the payroll. We wouldn't know who to trust. What about leaving the country permanently? We could go somewhere they can't reach us. Antonio shook his head. There's nowhere Vincent Torino can't reach. His organization has connections globally, and running would mean leaving our families behind forever. Your parents, your cousins. Maria's face fell at this. Her family meant everything to her. So what choice do we have? Before Antonio could answer, his phone rang. It was Isabella. Time's up. Her voice was cold. I've been more than patient. We're still in Rome. Give me time to get back. You're on a flight tonight. I know because I booked it for you. Business class. Very comfortable. A car will pick you up at JFK and bring you to my father's house. And if I refuse? Then your wife doesn't make it to the airport. My cousin Dominic is quite fond of her. I'm sure he'd take good care of her. The threat was clear. Antonio looked at Maria, who was watching him with wide eyes. Fine, we'll be on the plane. Just you, Antonio. Your wife stays in Rome until our business is concluded. Absolutely not. It's not a negotiation. Come alone or don't come at all, and we both know what happens if you don't come. The line went dead. Antonio threw the phone against the wall, shattering it. What did she say? Maria asked quietly. She wants me to return tonight. Alone. You're supposed to stay here. I'm not letting you face them alone. You don't have a choice, Antonio shouted, then immediately regretted it. He pulled Maria into his arms. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for all of this. We'll figure it out, Maria whispered against his chest. There has to be another way. They spent the rest of the day trying to find that other way. Maria called her cousin Miguel, a lawyer, but he admitted he knew nothing about organized crime law. Antonio reached out to old contacts, looking for anyone who might have influence with the Torinos, but came up empty. As evening approached, they prepared to go to the airport. Maria insisted on coming, refusing to be separated from Antonio. They packed in silence, both understanding that they might be walking into a trap. The car Isabella had arranged was waiting outside their hotel, a black Mercedes with tinted windows. The driver said nothing as they loaded their luggage. During the ride to the airport, Antonio held Maria's hand tightly, memorizing the feel of her skin against his. At Fiumicino Airport, they checked in without incident. But as they approached security, Antonio spotted Dominic near the gate. His message was clear. Maria wasn't getting on that plane. Listen to me, Antonio whispered urgently to Maria. When we get to security, I need you to go to the bathroom. Lock yourself in a stall and call your father. Tell him everything. Have him contact the American embassy. Antonio, no. Please, Maria. Trust me. I'll handle this. Maria looked like she wanted to argue, but something in his eyes stopped her. She nodded, kissing him fiercely before walking toward the restroom. Antonio watched her go, then approached Dominic. Change of plans? Dominic asked with a smirk. She's staying here. I'm coming alone, just like Isabella wanted. Smart man, though I have to say I'm disappointed. I was looking forward to spending time with your lovely wife. Antonio's fist connected with Dominic's jaw before he could think about it. Security immediately swarmed them, pulling them apart. In the chaos, Antonio saw Maria emerge from the bathroom, her face shocked. He mouthed, "I love you," before security dragged him away. Hours later, Antonio found himself on a plane to New York, sporting a black eye from his altercation with Dominic. The Italian authorities had released him after Dominic declined to press charges, but he'd been banned from the airport. It didn't matter. He was going where Isabella wanted him anyway. Meanwhile, Maria was detained for questioning. She told them everything, begging for help. but the authorities seemed skeptical. An American tourist claiming her husband was being forced back to America by the Mafia? It sounded like a bad movie plot. They released her after a few hours with a warning about making false reports. Desperate and alone, Maria called the only person she could think of who might help, Marco, Antonio's best friend. He answered on the second ring. "Maria, where's Antonio?" "They took him. The Torinos. They made him go back to New York. I'm alone in Rome and I don't know what to do." Marco cursed under his breath. "Where are you exactly?" "Police station near the airport. They didn't believe me about the Mafia." "Of course they didn't. Listen, I'm going to help you, but you need to trust me. Can you get back to your hotel?" "Yes, but do it. Pack your things and wait. I'll call you back in an hour." The hour felt like a lifetime. Maria paced her hotel room, jumping at every sound. When Marco finally called back, his voice was all business. "There's a flight to Paris in 3 hours. Take it. From there, you'll catch a connection to Montreal, then drive across the border. It's safer than flying direct to New York." "Why are you helping me?" "Because Antonio is like a brother to me. And because he'd never forgive me if something happened to you. Now listen carefully." While Maria began her journey home, Antonio was arriving at the Torino compound on Long Island. The massive estate was like a fortress, with high walls and armed guards. He was escorted to Vincent Torino's study, where the old man sat behind an enormous desk, looking frailer than Antonio remembered. Isabella was there too, dressed in a black suit that made her look like a beautiful undertaker. Vincent gestured for Antonio to sit. "You've caused my family great embarrassment," Vincent wheezed, his voice ravaged by illness. "Running away like a coward, breaking your engagement to my daughter." "With respect, Don Torino, I never formally agreed to the engagement." "That was an arrangement between you and my uncle." Vincent's eyes flashed dangerously. "Your uncle spoke for your family. His word was your word." "I've made a new family now," Antonio said firmly. "I have a wife." "A mistake that can be corrected," Isabella interjected. "Annulments can be arranged, or accidents, your choice." "If you hurt Maria—" "No one wants to hurt anyone," Vincent interrupted. "We're civilized people, Antonio. We solve problems with conversation, not violence, usually." The implied threat hung in the air. Antonio knew the Torino family history. They were anything but civilized when crossed. Vincent had built his empire on blood and fear, only adopting a veneer of respectability in recent years. "What do you want from me?" Antonio asked. "Simple. Honor your obligation. Marry my daughter. Take your place in our organization. Your uncle Salvatore speaks highly of your capabilities. We could use someone with your skills." "And my current marriage will be dissolved, one way or another." Antonio stood abruptly. "I need time to think." "Sit down," Vincent commanded, and despite himself, Antonio obeyed. "You've had 3 years to think. Now is the time for decisions." Isabella moved behind Antonio's chair, her hands resting on his shoulders. "It doesn't have to be difficult, Antonio. We were good together once. We could be again." "We were never together, Isabella. Not really. You know that." Her hands tightened painfully. "We could have been, if you'd given us a chance." A knock on the door interrupted them. One of Vincent's men entered, whispering urgently in the old Don's ear. Vincent's expression darkened. "It seems your wife has left Rome," he said to Antonio. "My people lost track of her at the airport." Antonio felt a surge of hope. Maria had gotten away, at least for now. Vincent continued, "No matter. We'll find her. We always do. The question is what condition she'll be in when we do." "You promised no violence," Antonio said through gritted teeth. "I promised we'd solve this through conversation. But if conversation fails—" Vincent shrugged, a gesture that carried decades of implied violence. They kept Antonio at the compound for 2 days, a guest and prisoner both. He was given a comfortable room, good food, and constant surveillance. Isabella visited frequently, alternating between sweet reminiscences of their shared past and thinly veiled threats about Maria's future. On the second night, Antonio was woken by his door opening. He tensed, ready to fight, but relaxed when he saw it was Marco. "What are you doing here?" Antonio whispered. "Getting you out. Get dressed, quickly." "How did you—" "Your Uncle Salvatore. He's not happy about this situation. Forced marriages are bad for business, too much attention. He's created a distraction. We have maybe 10 minutes. They moved through the compound like shadows. True to Marco's word, the guards were distracted by some commotion in another part of the estate. They made it to Marco's car without incident, speeding away into the night. "Where's Maria?" was Antonio's first question. "Safe. She's with your mother in New Jersey. Tough woman, your wife. She made it back on her own before I could even arrange transport." Antonio felt weak with relief. "Thank God." "Don't thank him yet," Marco warned. "This isn't over. Vincent's going to be furious when he discovers you're gone. And Isabella, she's not going to give up." They drove to a small house in Newark where Antonio's mother lived. Maria flew into his arms the moment he walked through the door, sobbing with relief. His mother watched from the doorway, her expression unreadable. "You've brought danger to our door," she said finally. "I'm sorry, Mom. I had nowhere else to go." She sighed and embraced him. "You're my son. My door is always open, but we need to find a permanent solution to this problem." They spent the night planning. Salvatore arrived near dawn, looking tired but determined. "I've spoken with the other families," he announced. "Most agree that Vincent is overstepping. Forced marriages reflect badly on all of us. We're not barbarians." "So they'll help?" Antonio asked hopefully. "They'll stay neutral, which is almost as good. Vincent won't risk a war over this, but there's a condition." Antonio's heart sank. There was always a condition. "You come back to work for the family," Salvatore continued. "Not full-time, but you help when needed. Consulting work, you might say. Your wife doesn't need to know the details." "I won't lie to Maria anymore," Antonio said firmly. "Then tell her the truth. Tell her you're doing what's necessary to keep her safe, because that's what this is, Antonio. Insurance." Maria, who had been quiet throughout the discussion, finally spoke. "What about Isabella?" Salvatore's expression was grim. "Isabella is complicated. She's genuinely in love with Antonio. In her own twisted way. That makes her unpredictable." As if summoned by her name, Antonio's phone, a new one Marco had provided, rang with an unknown number. "Put it on speaker," Salvatore instructed. Isabella's voice filled the room, cold and controlled. "Hello, Antonio. I assume you're with your uncle." "Hello, Salvatore." "Isabella?" Salvatore replied calmly. "You need to let this go. It's bad for business." "This isn't business. It's personal. Everything is business in our world, you know that. Not this." Her voice cracked slightly. "He promised to marry me. We had plans, a future. He doesn't get to just walk away." "I never promised you anything," Antonio said. "Your father and my uncle made plans. We were never consulted." "You didn't object. You went along with it for 2 years. You met my family, came to dinners, treated me like your fiancé. Then you disappear without a word and show up married to someone else? No. I don't accept it." Maria suddenly spoke up. "Isabella, I'm sorry for your pain. I truly am. But Antonio chose me. Forcing him won't change that." There was silence on the line. Then Isabella laughed bitterly. "The little barista speaks. You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into, girl. No idea what he really is." "I know exactly who he is," Maria said firmly. "He's my husband, and I'm not giving him up." "Then you'll die together," Isabella spat. "My father may be too sick to pursue this, but I'm not. I'll hunt you both to the ends of the earth. Isabella, enough! A new voice on the line. Vincent Torino himself. There was shuffling, muffled argument. Then Vincent spoke again. Salvatore, we need to meet. Neutral ground. Tomorrow. Name the place, Salvatore agreed. The old warehouse in Queens. You know the one. Bring your nephew and his wife. Let's end this properly. The line went dead. Everyone in the room exchanged worried looks. It's a trap, Marco said immediately. Maybe, Salvatore mused, or maybe Vincent's finally seeing reason. He's dying. He doesn't have time for a war. I won't put Maria in danger, Antonio said. You don't have a choice, his mother said quietly. If you don't show, they'll never stop coming. Sometimes you have to face the storm to find peace. The next night, they arrived at the warehouse as arranged. It was a neutral location, used for meetings between families when tensions were high. Antonio kept Maria close, his hand never leaving hers. Vincent was already there, looking even frailer than before, seated in a wheelchair. Isabella stood beside him, her face a mask of controlled fury. Several men from both families stood around the perimeter, a tense standoff. Let's make this quick, Vincent wheezed. I'm offering a compromise. Antonio returns to work for the families, not mine, but in a neutral capacity, a facilitator between organizations. In exchange, I call off any action against him or his wife. And Isabella? Salvatore asked. Will respect my decision, Vincent said firmly, though Isabella's expression suggested otherwise. What about our marriage? Antonio asked. I won't have it annulled. Keep your marriage, Vincent waved dismissively. I'm too old and too sick to care anymore. I just want peace before I die. It seemed too easy, too simple. Antonio was about to speak when Maria stepped forward. I have a condition, she said, surprising everyone. Vincent raised an eyebrow. You have a condition? You're lucky to be breathing, girl. Isabella needs to hear this, Maria continued, undeterred. She turned to face the other woman. I know you love him. I can see it. But love isn't possession. Love is wanting the other person to be happy, even if it's not with you. Don't lecture me about love, Isabella snarled. I'm not lecturing. I'm offering understanding and a promise. Maria took a deep breath. If Antonio ever tells me he loves you, if he ever wants to be with you instead of me, I'll step aside. No fight, no drama. I'll let him go. Maria, no! Antonio started, but she squeezed his hand. But until that day, you have to let us be. No threats, no violence, no interference. Let him choose every day to stay with me, because forced love isn't love at all. Isabella stared at Maria for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. You'd really let him go? If he wanted to go, yes, because I love him that much. The warehouse was silent. Even the hardened criminals seemed moved by Maria's words. Finally, Isabella spoke. You're braver than I thought, she admitted quietly. And maybe you're right. Forced love isn't love. She looked at her father, who nodded slightly. I accept your terms, Isabella said. But know this, I'll be watching. If you ever hurt him, if you ever make him unhappy, I'll be there. I wouldn't expect anything less, Maria replied. Vincent coughed, breaking the moment. Then it's settled. Salvatore, we'll discuss Antonio's new role tomorrow. For now, everyone go home. I'm tired. As the groups began to disperse, Isabella approached Antonio one last time. Be happy, she said simply, then walked away without looking back. Outside the warehouse, Antonio pulled Maria into his arms. That was insane. You could have been killed. But I wasn't, Maria said, smiling through her tears. And now we're free, relatively speaking. You know I'll have to work for them sometimes. It won't be completely legitimate. I know. And we'll deal with it together. No more secrets, no more lies. Just us, facing whatever comes. 6 months later, Antonio and Maria renewed their vows in a small ceremony with just close family. This time, there were no unexpected guests, no threats lurking in the shadows. Salvatore gave a toast about family and loyalty. Marco joked about Antonio's cooking skills. Even Antonio's mother smiled throughout the ceremony. They never heard from Isabella again, though sometimes Antonio thought he glimpsed her in crowds or caught a hint of her perfume on the wind. Vincent Torino died 3 months after the warehouse meeting, and Isabella took over parts of his empire, becoming one of the youngest female crime bosses in New York history. Antonio did indeed work as a facilitator between families, using his intelligence and connections to prevent conflicts and negotiate agreements. Maria never asked for details about his work, but she never had to wonder where he was either. He was home every night for dinner just as he'd promised. Their first child was born on a crisp fall day, almost 2 years after their wedding. As Antonio held his daughter for the first time, he thought about the choices that had led him here, the courage to leave his old life, the courage to fight for his new one, and most of all, the courage of a barista who'd stood up to the mob for love. "What should we name her?" Maria asked, exhausted but glowing. "Hope," Antonio said without hesitation. "Because that's what you gave me. Hope for a better life." Maria smiled, touching their daughter's tiny hand. "Hope it is." And in that moment, in that small hospital room, with his wife and child safe in his arms, Antonio finally felt truly free. The past would always be there, a shadow at the edges of their life. But it no longer defined them. They had chosen love over fear, truth over lies, and hope over despair. Their story had begun with wedding joy, turning to nightmare. But in the end, they'd awakened to find that love, real love, was stronger than any threat, more powerful than any crime family, and worth any risk. The bells of the hospital chapel chimed the hour, a sound that no longer brought Antonio fear, but instead reminded him of that September day when Maria had walked down the aisle toward him, bringing light into his darkness. He kissed his wife's forehead, then his daughter's, and whispered a prayer of gratitude for second chances and the courage to take them.